Good evening and welcome again to our second moment of the evening, sometime in this new space. It is truly an honor and a joy to introduce this evening our lecturer, Dr. M. Sean Copeland. Sean is a professor of systematic theology at Boston College. She also works closely with the interdisciplinary program in African and African diaspora studies. Prior to joining the faculty at Boston College, Sean taught at St. Norbert College, Yale Divinity School, and our neighbor Marquette University. She is a prolific author with more than 100 publications to her credit. Two of her most recent books include The Subversive Power of Love, The Vision of Henriette DeLille, and In Fleshing Freedom, Body, Race, and Being. Sean received her PhD from Boston College with a dissertation that focused on the notion of the human good in the thought of Bernard Lonergan. At the root of her theology, she pursues the important question, what is the best and most worthwhile way to live? Reading her books next to the works of St. Catherine in preparation for tonight truly impressed upon me the voice of two great doctors. Catherine of Siena, a doctor of the Church, and Sean Copeland, a renowned doctor of theology. For Catherine, reform of the Church meant inspiring the members of the Church to work together, honoring their respective roles to collectively bring about the reign of God. She urged her companions to uphold true holy justice. Likewise, Sean is one of the most respected voices in our time, calling us as citizens of the Church and of the world to bring about God's justice here and now. In particular, she demonstrates how Black women's historical experience of oppression has to offer new insights for theological anthropology. For Sean, the embodiment of justice invites us all to engage political transformation in service to the common good. She spoke a few years ago at a convention for the common good and stated, quote, "It is only through the gift of grace realized in human lives and hearts that we can meet the effects of sin with healing and creative solidarity. We here are a little yeast," end quote. I think we can all agree that Sean's work is that yeast that spurs us on to action, that challenges us to rethink the common good, and to imagine what true holy justice might look like here and now. Thank you, Sean, for helping us understand a contextualized theological anthropology for our current time, and also for providing the tools to appreciate what is needed to love our neighbor today, to effectively work on the praxis of solidarity. So without further delay, please join me in welcoming Dr. M. Sean Copeland.
Thank you very much for such a thoughtful introduction. And thank all of you for coming this evening. It's a lovely, I don't want to say foretaste, but it's a teaser for better weather, we all hope. I want to reflect with you this evening on authenticity and conversion, using Catherine of Siena as a kind of resource for our own thinking about this. And some of this is not case-specific, but I think we'll have plenty of opportunities when I'm finished here for you to think out loud about authenticity and the meaning of conversion as we as church may experience it. I'm very honored really to give the Siena lecture. Catherine of Siena is really one of my heroes since I was a small person. And, okay, so I'm still small. but I really I'm deeply honored, and I'm grateful to Dr. Noonan for inviting me, and I'm very pleased also to see some very warm and friendly faces in the audience. And it's been a pleasure to meet your students this today, and so let me begin. When Dr. Claire Noonan invited me to lecture here in December 2012, we confirmed this arrangement in January 2013, and my thought had been to utilize the opportunity to probe instances of our ecclesial struggle away from unauthenticity and toward conversion and authenticity, and what we might learn of this from the life of Catherine of Siena. But who could have imagined that on February 11th, 2013, Pope Benedict XVI would announce his intention to resign the papacy of the Roman Catholic Church, the first pope, as we know, to do so since Gregory XII in 1415. On Benedict's account, deteriorating health due to advanced age persuaded him to take this decision, and on February 28, 2013, he did so. The conclave to elect his successor opened on March 12, 2013. And who among us could have imagined that the very next day, March 13th, the cardinal electors would choose Jesuit Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the Cardinal Archbishop of Buenos Aires, Argentina, as the 266th Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. With simplicity and warmth, openness and candor, concern for the poor and vulnerable, a unique choice of papal name, and his Jesuit membership, the new Pope captured global religious and secular attention in fresh and refreshing ways. It has been tempting for me to think that there might be little to say. But E.J. Dionne, columnist for the Washington Post and regular contributor to Commonweal magazine, observes, the Pope, quote, has not altered church doctrine, but his shift in emphasis has been breathtaking, close quote. Indeed, Francis's pastoral orientation, his disdain for the trappings of papal power, his criticisms of careerism and clericalism, his encouragement to discipleship have lifted expectations of the church and brought joy to many a ravaged heart. Still, feminist theologian and social activist Mary Hunt cautions against papal euphoria. The spate of marvelous press, she writes, quote, renders it harder, not easier, close quote, for theologians to provide necessary and faithful critique of the church as we confront our institutional temptations to abuse of power and to abuse and neglect of persons. With the phrase institutional temptation to abuse of power, I mean our ecclesial difficulty in authentically understanding, engaging, and empowering all three sources of the search for truth in Catholic teaching: the hierarchy, the sensus fidelium, or the experienced, nourished wisdom of the laity, and what St. Thomas Aquinas called the magisterium of the theologians. With the phrase institutional temptation to abuse and neglect of persons, I refer to our unseemly, sinful, and criminal entanglement in the sexual abuse of children and adults, as well as our neglect, even our holding in disdain, the intelligence, skill, energy, goodwill, and dedication of many millions of women, as well as people of color, gay and lesbian people eager to contribute, participate, and commit themselves to the building up of an authentic and creative ecclesial life. The building up of an authentic and creative ecclesial life together requires necessary and faithful critique, and this critique leads us to Catherine of Siena, a woman who knew well what it meant to live in the tension between authenticity and unauthenticity, to live out and to urge others, as well as herself, onto conversion. The general outline of Caterina di Giacomo di Benencasa's life is fairly well known here. Born in 1347, 4 or 5 years after Julian of Norwich, and in the lengthening shadow of global outbreaks of the Great Plague, Catherine was the daughter of Lapa de Picchio Piacenti and Jacopo di Benencasa, a dyer and wool merchant. Her childhood was comfortable, her family large and loving, yet marked by sorrow. Catherine's twin died soon after birth, and her favorite older sister, Bonaventura, died in childbirth. We are aware of her early attraction to religious services at the Dominican church near her home. Her childhood resolved to give herself totally to Jesus, as well as the gradual drifting away from that promise. The fierce determination of Lapa to arrange a financially profitable marriage for her youngest daughter, the reawakening of Catherine's desire of self-donation, the stubborn and dramatic gesture of cutting off her hair to offset marriage, and her acceptance of the grinding drudgery of domestic work in her family's demanding household. Her own fierce determination to join the Montellate, to devote herself to prayer and solitude. Her life of intense prayer and spiritual gifts, her extraordinary love and service to the poor, the most abject, her gradual emergence and wide influence as a woman of love and peace, of passion and joy, of authority. And that emergence takes place in the midst of personal and social conflict, even schism. Her love of that devoted but tentative familia of friends and disciples, excuse me, her preaching, teaching, and extensive correspondence, her unswerving love of the church, and spending herself in defense of its unity. Catherine's passion for truth led her to agitate for its concrete realization in church and society. That is, to work for the creative and healing transformation that only authentic conversion to truth effects. Through profound and intense prayer, loving union with Christ, Catherine arrived at insight into the truth of her own existence, and thus she became effective as a reconciler and restorer. Through discipline and suffering, she grew in the virtues of faith, hope, and love, and she grew in the courage to struggle for truth, to work to bring it about in church and society. Across more than 6 centuries, Catherine of Siena commands us, open your mind's eye and tear out every root of selfish love and self-pampering, so that you may come to know God's truth. Raymond of Capua, Catherine's biographer and friend, records that in the year 1370, after praying for union with God, Catherine underwent a mystical death, sharing for several days in the passion of the crucified Christ. Deploying the imagery of the 14th century, Raymond tells us that her participation in Christ's suffering produced in her such an inflow of love that her heart literally burst. She seemed to have died, but some hours later regained consciousness. During this mystical death, Catherine is said to have traveled through heaven, hell, purgatory, seeing all that there is in that next world, which is normally invisible to us here below. She witnessed the glory of saints and the punishment of sinners. But she is told that she has been granted this vision not for herself, not for her own benefit, but for that of others. Christ commissions her to return to this world and preach repentance in light of what she has seen. He says to her, do you see what great glory those souls who offend me are robbed of, and what penalties they are punished with? Go back to earth and show their peril. Show them the harm they are doing themselves. Catherine's experience results in a prophetic mission for reform, the call to conversion, for the movement away from unauthenticity toward authenticity. Christ assures her, "You will give proofs of the Spirit that is in you, before small and great, before lay folk and clergy and religious, for I will give you a mouth and a wisdom which none shall be able to resist. I will bring you before pontiffs and the rulers of churches and the Christian people, in order that I may do as is my way, and use what is weak to put to shame the pride of the strong." Catherine the prophet is sent out under divine command, relinquishing ordinary routines and securities, surrendering to a condition of utter dependence upon God. That quintessential and classical prophet Jeremiah says, "I do not sit blithely in the company of merrymakers, because thy hand is upon me. I sit alone, for thou hast filled me with indignation." Jeremiah 15:17. In response to this charge, Catherine moves and acts and speaks, transgressing social convention, violating ordinary ecclesiastical norms, teaching publicly and preaching. Raymond wants us to grasp the significance of divine action in Catherine for transformation, for conversion. So he associates her prophetic call with that of the call of the prophet par excellence, Moses. Thus, during an earlier vision, when she is forewarned that she will be drawn into the public sphere, Catherine asks, "How can one like me, feeble and of no account, do any good for souls?" God's words to Moses are evoked. "I will give you a mouth and a wisdom." Like the prophets of the Hebrew Bible, Catherine shames the pride of men because her words represent divine rather than human self-communication. Through baptism, all members of the assembly, the ecclesia, the church, take up the commission of Christ. The Logos is the Word of God through whom all things were made, and sent into the world to manifest the Creator's love for the world. In the grammar of classical Trinitarian economy, the Son is the Father's absolute communication, God's very word, God's claim to have a say in the aims and purposes, the direction of human lives, human societies, human cultures, human history. In the dialogue, Catherine reminds us by baptism we are the workers Christ himself has hired for the vineyard. Through the light of holy baptism, he has sent us by his grace to work in the universal body of Christianity. By that very holy light, the assembly, the ecclesia gathers to confess and witness to Jesus as Christ, and gathers around him as its transforming center. Yet the church is the work of human minds and hearts and hands. It is a community sharing the common experience of being in love with God and the common judgments and decisions and meanings that flow from and form the women and men who constitute that community, the ecclesia. At the same time, the community of believers is absorbed in the cultivation and practice of habits of knowing and loving God and neighbor in imitation of Christ in the here and now. We are called to be disciples. Still, our history as Christian community teaches us baptism is no guarantee of unity, no guarantee of truth, no guarantee of love, not even within communities. Nor is it insurance against breakdown and collapse, against unauthenticity. Christian life may be authentic or unauthentic. And according to Jesuit theologian and philosopher Bernard Lonergan, this may happen in two ways. There is the minor authenticity or unauthenticity of a member with respect to the tradition that nourishes her or him. In this case, a member is judged by her or his co-religionists in relation to appropriation and incarnation of the tradition. But there remains the major authenticity or unauthenticity of the tradition itself. This judgment shall be made by history and ultimately by divine providence. We each may ask ourselves whether we are Christian and answer affirmatively. Yet our ready response may grow from misunderstanding, from selective inattention, or from hidden rationalizations. What I am is one thing. What an authentic or genuine Christian is may be another. And I am unaware or inured to the difference. I unauthentically appropriate the tradition and thereby devalue, distort, corrupt it, water it down. This devaluation and distortion and corruption, this watering down may occur among individuals, but it may occur on a much larger scale as well. The unauthenticity of individuals becomes the unauthenticity of a tradition. Then, in the measure a person takes the tradition as it exists for her or his standard, and in that measure, she or he can do no more than authentically realize unauthenticity. We may say with considerable confidence that history and divine providence has affirmed the judgment and action of Catherine of Siena on behalf of the living church of the 14th century. Our situation is different. Ambiguity and anguish, confusion and conflict characterize our living church of the 21st century. As church, we have found it difficult to authentically understand, engage, and empower all members of our community to participate in and contribute to discernment of truth and action. As church, we have succumbed to the institutional temptation to abuse and neglect persons. Some of us have been entangled in the unseemly and sinful and criminal sexual abuse of children and adults. Others of us have neglected millions of women and people of color, gays and lesbians, each and all of whom are eager to contribute and participate, sacrifice and commit themselves to building up authentic and creative ecclesial life. And while it may not be improbable to associate the future of the church at any given moment in history with any single papacy, it might well be presumptuous to do so. On the one side, such association may seduce us to relinquish our baptismal obligation, to disengage, to live in indifference. We substitute wishing for creative and faithful action, mere optimism for the courage of hope. On the other side, such association may tempt us to polarization. We prefer our select, privileged, and thoroughly solipsistic sect. On each side, baptismal vows function like cudgels aimed at fending off the questions and objections, insights and challenges of the other. Each side insists on its instantiation and interpretation as pure, orthodox, right, just, and true, and therefore above all critique. Each insists on its authenticity and the unauthenticity of the other. Each insists that the other is in need of conversion, of transformation, but each means something more like conquest and subordination into the other. Each side argues the exclusivity of its claim on the Holy Spirit, and each is mired in unauthenticity. Movement away from unauthentic appropriation of the Christian message to authenticity passes through the road of conversion. So I want to sketch then 3 ways to think about conversion or transformation of a person and a person's world. Conversion implies a radical change of course. a woman or a man take such a decision or a thoroughgoing turn in a new direction, so much so that her or his entire life is changed. The movement toward this change may be the prolonged process of a lifetime, disclosed in a few crucial judgments, a few decisions. Yet conversion is never simply coincident with growth or maturity or even development. Rather, conversion always stands as a profound change in which someone wholly new emerges. And the change that conversion brings about permeates and enriches cumulatively our human development, influences our personality and character, manifests itself in every area of our human living. We can identify three of these: cognitive, religious, and moral conversion. These may overlap and penetrate one another, yet each is a different type of event. And although conversion is existential, intensely personal, and utterly intimate, it is neither solitary nor individual. Conversion can and does occur to many. These women and men may be drawn together over time to support and to challenge one another in living out the implications of their self-transformation, of their conversion. Cognitive conversion regards our critical grasp of what it means to know. It resists the description that knowing is looking and that objectivity is taking a good look. The persistence of this error, though, makes it difficult, if not impossible, to distinguish correctly between the sum of our experience and the world that is mediated by meaning. It traps us in a kind of world of common sense. Cognitive conversion clarifies knowing as attentive to experience, understanding, judging, and deciding. It helps us to realize that objectivity is not seeing what is already out there now to be seen, but is guided by that compound criteria proper to experiencing, understanding, judging, and deciding. Moreover, and quite importantly, cognitive conversion recognizes and contests ideology's claim to be natural, to be permanent, and to be logically necessary. Moral conversion shifts the criteria by which we appraise our choices and actions, and thus it supports us in distinguishing mere satisfaction from true good and directs our decisions. The unfolding of moral conversion requires us to scrutinize any situation, develop adequate understanding of it within the framework of a differentiated knowledge of human reality. And in this process, we may discover our own potentialities as well as those of others, expose instances and elements of collapse or decline, and eliminate individual and group bias by choosing to do what is intelligent and responsible and therefore practical. In this way, we come to real solutions to complex problems and genuine progress, or the coincidence of true good and true value, and practical, intelligent activity. This coincidence is made more probable. We realize moral conversion in our daily living. We realize it in our doing, in our practice. Religious conversion denotes being caught up in an otherworldly love, the otherworldly love of God. And yet that love is lived out in this world. That is the challenge of moral conversion. Religious conversion is not something static. It's something dynamic that directs all our decisions and choices. When we think about this in the light of the Christian tradition, we speak of it as God's gift of love flooding the heart through the Holy Spirit. God's gift of grace as God's gift of grace, turning the heart of stone to the heart of flesh, and the heart of flesh becoming effective in good works. Religious conversion, then, is that sometimes fitful, though usually gradual and consistent turning towards a full and complete transformation of the whole of our living and feeling, our thoughts and words and deeds, and our omissions. It is realized in our concrete struggle in the here and now to live in fidelity to the Word of God. The resonance in charge of the authenticity of the life of Jesus calls followers to live the gospel, to share its good news, to spread its message. The Christian then must steep herself or himself in the incarnate Word, who is Jesus crucified, in order to announce the joyful news of God's reign, to sow the Word with such truth and light as to dispel alienation and injustice. In a letter to Raymond, Catherine writes, "Be trumpeters of the incarnate Word, God's Son, not only with your voice, but with your deeds. Learn the Master of Truth, who practiced virtue before he preached it. In this way, you will produce fruit and be the channel through which God will pour grace into the hearts of those who hear you." What Catherine preaches, what Catherine teaches, is that in which she clothes herself. And that is her passion for truth. For Catherine, Jesus crucified and risen is the master of truth, the way and the life. In a meditation on the Feast of the Conversion of St. Paul, she muses, "The Word became flesh and lived among us. He, since he is truth, would by his actions make himself the way by which we might travel to the life for which we have been created, but which we had lost." She urges that we seek truth wherever it may be found and focuses on its relational aspects. We must see and recognize the truth in our neighbors, whether they are great or small, lords or subjects. I mean that when they are doing something and ask us to do it too, we should want to know whether or not it is grounded in truth and what is motivating this action. If we do not do this, we are acting stupidly and blindly, following after a blind guide grounded on a lie. We are showing that truth is not in us because we are not searching for truth. Indeed, Susan Noffke has observed, at the base of all Catherine's thinking about justice is God's truth. All justice for Catherine is founded upon this truth within the individual, and this living according to God's truth in relationship to oneself, with God, and with other persons. In our shattered global village, rife with flagrant inequalities that have reduced millions to indigence, starvation, illiteracy, and crime, there rises from all sides a yearning for more justice and a desire for a better guaranteed peace in mutual respect among individuals and peoples. For many of us, it is evident that those changes bring about authentic justice in society will require radical shifts in the cultural and moral character of individual human persons and societies. For some of us, it is even evident that those changes will require collaborative, non-dominative, and cooperative ways of engaging one another in contexts that are culturally pluralistic. And still fewer of us know how to meet the demands of cultural diversity and cultural pluralism. What is that we must see and recognize as the truth of our neighbors, whether they are great or small? Is this not a problem with which we are grappling today? Can all of these different men and women have the same human nature? Does emphasis on cultural or ethnic or racial difference undermine the notion that there is but one real human nature? What is it in the essence of each human being that accounts for our real likeness in kind and for our real difference as individuals? To say that our transformation as individuals and as a people is the product of a struggle to know truth means that we must be willing to follow truth wherever it leads. To be humble and serious enough to risk changing our positions, changing our minds. It means that we must question our presuppositions, our assumptions, our beliefs, our conclusions. And it means that we must love truth more than wealth and influence, more than privilege and position, more than friends and family, more than teachers and employers, indeed more than our very lives. Yet, Catherine cautions we must know when to risk and when not to risk. She writes, "We must not act like a simpleton. No, I want you to stand on the battlefield as one who is truly obedient and willing to suffer, enlightened. There, God's servants fight together, and they don't seek out new or special battles that might be risky and blind. Take on the common and well-lighted." And again, truth does not remain silent when it is time to speak, for it is afraid of the powerful. Nor are we afraid of losing our life because we are already prepared to give it for love of truth. We fear only God. To say that our movement toward self-transcendence or toward authenticity as individuals and as a community is a struggle to do truth means that we make ourselves available to conversion, that we change the standard by which we take our bearings, by which we appraise our options, by which we evaluate those choices, either as satisfactions or values, yet deciding is one thing, doing another, and what is good must be done. The precise nature of that good will come to light only after critical and conscientious scrutiny of the complex relations which shape the material, social, historical order of our human world. Catherine urges us, give everyone justice. Do the right thing for everyone, the small as well as the great, the poor as well as the rich. Let your justice not be corrupted by flattery or threats, by approval or disapproval, but keep the scales steady, giving each person what reason requires. At the same time, we have much inner work to do. Work against resentment, bitterness, and hatred in ourselves. We have much work to do. Justice requires an immense effort. Human willfulness and pride must be replaced by authentic love. An institutionalized ideological conflict should be met with critical and normative intelligence. As we struggle to incarnate and to realize concretely the fruits of doing truth, we ourselves become living incarnations of healing and creativity. To say that our transformation as individuals and as a people is a struggle to incarnate truth draws attention repeatedly to the presence or absence of personal and communal authenticity in our thinking, our knowing, our feeling, our doing. Indeed, to speak about living truth demands our nuanced understanding about who we are, who we have and still may become, the choices we have made. For it is our choice whether, in our searching for truth and value, we act in such a way as to achieve greater authenticity or less. Catherine was a woman on fire with love, and it was love that provided the higher integration of the concrete in her life and in the lives of others. She is a model for our exercise of freedom. She is a model for our exercise of the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love. Those virtues for Catherine, as she finds them, are in the cross of Jesus, that most mysterious meeting place of grace and freedom, a concrete example of the cost of authentic love. We are to imitate Christ, and our practice of the theological virtues sustains us in our knowing and doing and living truth. And through our knowing and doing and living truth, we begin to transform not only our social order, so it becomes a potential good, but we also transform our ecclesia, our assembly. Catherine's passion for truth led her to struggle for its concrete realization in church and society, to struggle for the creative and healing transformation that only conversion to truth effects. Through profound and intense prayer, loving union with Christ, she arrived at insight into the truth of her own existence, and thus she became effective as a reconciler and restorer. She grew in the virtues of faith and hope and love, and she grew in the struggle to fight for truth, the struggle to work to bring it about. Across more than 6 centuries, she still commands us, open your mind's eye and tear out every root of selfish love and self-pampering, so that you may come to know God's truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. In many ways, you incarnate that truth that you called us to reflect on tonight in the life of Catherine. So thank you. It's a privilege to have you here. We have some time now for question and answers, so I invite the audience to consider what you may want to ask Sean this evening. And Janet and I both have mics, so you can bring them to you.
Thanks so much. That was just amazing. I just wanted to ask, because of the way you opened up telling us all kind of what this light of Pope Francis is about, and somebody wrote 10 things that we want Pope Francis to do concerning, and one of them was talking about a theology of women,
Yeah.
and that kind of rose some eyebrows in the company that I keep. And I was just wondering, would you comment a little on that, or what kind of a theology are we asking, should we ask Pope Francis for?
That's a really good question. It is. And I think sometimes when we do theologies of, we're identifying something special and unique. Women have been around since creation. In the very beginning, skip the second story. Skip the second story. I think, you know, what we're struggling with, what we've been struggling with, is a tension in theological anthropologies, one of which has been fairly regnant for the last, I guess, 30 years, which has been about complementarity, that women complement men. And the complement is really a kind of subordination, that we supply what's lacking and not much is lacking. And so in that way, we don't need that kind of theology. We might ask, why don't we have a theology of men? How should men behave? How should men realize their vocation to manhood? So I think one of the difficulties, and I think this is fair. Few popes really know women, and I mean this in the most polite and respectful way. If you know no sisters who are presidents of colleges or deans or chairs of departments, or who write books, or who are doctors or attorneys, or biologists or oceanographers, if your idea, and every religious woman in this room will be revolting against this, if your idea is that sister comes in to make my bed and serve my, then you have a very limited idea. And I think this is what we've experienced, because each of these popes, for the last three popes certainly, including this one, have had a kind of formation that hasn't included companionship with women as peers. And so there's a real deficiency. You can have that companionship and still assume superiority, just because you think ideologically it's always been that way and it's logically necessary to save us from sin and evil. But I think that's the issue from my perspective. So I'm not really looking for a theology of women. You know, I think if we need to have a theology, there are plenty of women who are writing theologies about women that many of you in here are reading and, you know, discussing and arguing about, because you agree with some of it and you disagree with other parts of it, and that's the way it should be. That's the way it should. That's what I think. That's what I think. What do you really think? Yeah, hard being on the hot seat, huh?
I'm kind of humbled to say that I don't know if I can really say out loud. I mean, I agree with what you said about the question about, I think, and when people ask about the quality of human beings, my general pat answer is imago Dei.
Yes, absolutely.
And I had several, when people say, this one should stay away, and this one that, and this one's what's wrong with her, and this one, and you just say, could I just leave you with these two words, imago Dei?
Yeah.
And then I know that Pope did kind of address that when somebody asked him about the sin of being gay or something, and he said, who am I? You know, imago Dei. Whenever we look at anyone, it should be imago Dei. And that other question is, as you mentioned, what would a theology of man look like? And what we wouldn't write a theology of man, we write theologies of liberation. Well, that, yes. So are we other than you, I might say, to, are we some other form of human being?
Yeah.
Kind of the imago that might be looking at a cracked mirror or something, where, so, and if we ignore one part of the body, then we have an incomplete body.
That's right.
So we don't write a theology of thumb, as opposed to a theology of foot. Oh, I'm starting to sound like St. Paul. I'll be quiet.
That's great. No, it's right.
This isn't about me.
But
The theology would be about me.
But imago Dei is the word, isn't it? That's the phrase. You see, we're stuck on that old, you know, from our brother Thomas. We're stuck on that little idea that he got from Aristotle, the ill wind blew, and somehow we got, you know, the deformed man, woman. Yeah. And we're stuck in it somehow. So we're struggling out of it, and we are. But I think it's the formation. This is part of what's key here in all of this conversation about authenticity and unauthenticity. It's your formation.
Thank you so much for that really challenging message. And I wonder if I might ask you to be a little bit personal with us, because I see through your writing, you as a person who has done this, has come to claim a voice of truth and to speak even when it's risky. And if you don't mind, would you say a little bit about your own spiritual practice of how did you get the courage to do that, I guess is what I really am curious
Well, I do what everyone else in here does. You know, I mean, you sort of pray, and it sort of becomes because, you start out with your time and your place and your chair and your book and then you have to stay up late, and then you're getting up early but you try to hold your feet to the fire, and then you have a spiritual director, someone that you can trust with all the aspects of your life, so that you try to live in an integrated fashion for yourself. And I think that's what everybody in here tries to do, and that's what you do, I'm sure. Because there's no other way to do what we do as church. I'm not thinking about theology, although I think that every theologian should be praying. I really do, and a lot. Because it's not easy and it's tough, and to be really honest and true to what you do. But I think that's the Christian challenge, and I think we all have issues that we struggle with, and so I think we. Lent goes by and you went, wow, I was trying to do this, but I didn't quite get there, So I think, but our Christian lives are the lives that we lead. They're not something extra added on to it. It's the life we lead, and we lead it with something in mind, And what we hope we have in mind as Christians is Jesus. That's what it means to be a disciple. That's what it means to follow him. So that's that's my little bit of personal. You try to examine your conscience and not get caught up in your own justifications, which is really easy to do. Where everybody's sitting here going, "Yep, I know that one." I would have gone, but I stayed up too late, and I'll go tomorrow, but I stayed up too late again, and I'll go the next day. But I think it's the commitment. You keep doing it. You keep doing it. Even if you fall, you have to get up. That's the point. You're not defined by the fall. You're defined by the getting up, and the consistency that you struggle to bring to it.
Dr. Coleman, I just have a question. It's been an honor to be with you this evening. You've been
The
one of my
honor's
great
mine.
inspiration in my studies here at Dominican. One of my question is first from one of your definitions of conversion, primarily cognitive conversion. And you stated recognizing ideologies that claim to be natural, permanent, and necessary. I guess, how can we intersect the truth, as we talked about this evening, but also trying to, I guess, break down and understand the social constructions of race and gender? How do we intersect those?
Well, I think this is the question about, let's have a getting a theology of something. Part of it is I use ideology always in the pejorative, that it's always negative, and you're always working to try to clarify that, because it's a falsity that justifies what it is that we do. So yes, it helps us when we begin to recognize that, in fact, this is not what I was, this is not why I'm created here. This is not why I bear the image of the Imago Dei to whatever it is. That's the kind of irrational, but that we've turned into irrational. I think one of the ways in which we could say this, I think, quite sincerely and quite sadly, that in this way, as Christians, we've let ourselves down. Jesus' people, we have let him down by, in fact, buying into some of the regnant opinions of the culture. And in that way, you can recognize ideology and social constructs, but we still live with them. We still live by them. And so the struggle is to get beyond that, to see in Jesus the opportunity to break out of your own little boxes, our own little boxes and stereotypes. He does that. Even if people push him out, he does that. So the woman, you know, who's begging for her daughter, you know, and he's saying, you know, I'm sorry, you're not my group. And she awakens him to the possibility that maybe we're all your group. You know, maybe we're all your group, or at least we all want you. And if we all want you, we're putting a little pressure on you to give us some attention. I think the other thing is that just being able to meet up with people. I mean, there's the woman at the well. I mean, we can go through all sorts of. I mean, he doesn't seem to have these issues, and these issues are not endemic to Judaism. You know, let's be clear about that. These issues about women are not endemic to Judaism. They are fundamentally, in a certain way, everybody living out of a kind of old social construct. And in this way, it's an ordering of society. You know, Elizabeth Schuster-Fiorenza likes to talk about kyriarchy. We've got lordship, and it's this lordship which becomes very oppressive. So I think here, being available to new knowledge, I mean, really making yourself available to something new is a beginning. Taking risks in an appropriate way, not reckless, but you can be prudent without being cautious, I think. I think you can be prudent without being cautious. So I think those are ways in which we break out to meet a new person, not collecting experience, not collecting new encounters. I met one of those and I had lunch with that person. Not that. We all know that. That's the laughter of recognition. We found ourselves at that edge every now and then. But we're never going to have, if we don't get out of where we are. They're very, and we Catholics have very sharp patterns. You may know John McGreevy's book on parish boundaries, which is really about the ways in which the Catholic Church remains a very segregated church racially. So I think there are ways. You can't run when the new people move, because you know everywhere you go, we're coming. It's a law of nature. It's a law of nature. That's exactly right.
Yes. Thank you for doing this wonderful talk tonight. Especially, I like the exposition of Bernard Lonergan's theology.
Thank you.
Here's what came to my mind when you were talking about the tradition itself. Sometimes goes a little off track, and so there's a need to deal with becoming more authentic as a tradition. And it seems to me today, one of the issues we have to deal with is the interfaith experience and relationship. And that perhaps one of our problems in looking in our own mirror is that we don't see ourselves in the other. And sometimes in interfaith experiences, events, and programs, we stay at the level of being nice and being seen to be nice and, you know, putting aside all of our cultural issues. But at root, there's still that desire to be the one and only ones loved by Jesus in this very, very special way. So anyway, could you reflect on that and talk about that?
Thank you. I can't say too much, but I was recently, in fact, just today's Wednesday, so Monday, Rowan Williams, the former Archbishop of Canterbury, was at our university and gave a lecture on interfaith, on Revelation in light of interfaith conversation. He preferred that word to dialogue, which I thought was very interesting, because we think of dialogue, you speak then, I speak then, you speak then, I speak. And you have a prepared text and I have one, but the conversation means topics that we hadn't predicted might come up. Just as when you're talking to your friends, you start talking and you're just moving all around. It's not a linear, usually, you know, it's here and then we're there and we're, so one of the things that struck me in listening to him and trying to appreciate the points that he's making is, of course, that, which was very strange for us, I think, to hear. He said that, let me just say it this way, kind of a paraphrase, that we have to talk long enough and listen attentively, patiently, humbly, so that we can begin to recognize our own, I would say loves and habits and commitments in the loves and habits and commitments of the other. But we're not doing that in the sense of saying, as you just said, you're just like I am, and so it's all over now. And I'm still on top because you're just like me. You know, you're really a secret Christian or an anonymous Christian, whatever. You know, in that way. And I think what it was making me think about is the significance of a doctrine like the doctrine of revelation for systematic theology in engaging in interfaith conversation. Because it's asking, what do certain faiths have about God as revealed? In other words, what do we see about God as revealed? Well, we see God as acting, as self-consistent, as free, never arbitrary. That God really is a God who makes and keeps promises. And so I think when we think about this kind of conversation, you're right, we want to see the other, but we're not really. What we're seeing is, as you say, ourselves. But I took from that, and he did say this, it's talking long enough and listening patiently and humbly enough so that when I say, oh wow, that helps me understand what I'm doing, but it also means that I'm surprised. That's the other point that he made. We have to be willing to be surprised. And that means, to me, that really means that you have to be willing to let go a little bit. That you just, can't be so, orderly. It's 1, 2, 3. And if you try to skip to 7, I get really nervous. So I think your point is it's a very important one. The other thing about the tradition, when you were speaking, also that occurred to me is when we start thinking about going off track with regard to women, we keep ignoring people like Phoebe and Dorcas, and so we're already kind of off the house church track. We're really off that already. But we've come back a few years ago in encyclicals to domestic church. I'm not the ecclesiologist. There are some ecclesiologists here. I'm just kind of, an amateur ecclesiologist. But there are, we really come back to this idea of domestic church. The family is the first church. But we wandered away here, and if we say that, even if we use an old anthropology, who's at the heart of the family? Yes. Who's at the heart of the family? So who should be then really the primary instructor, the primary presider? Well, if we were in a Jewish family, that's who would be. That's who would be every Shabbat. So I think this is very important about thinking about how we go off track. Or if you go down to the catacombs, my friends who are art historians say, you find these, I haven't been there, but you find these erased pictures of women. What happened? So we go off track. And how do we get ourselves back? Well, once you're off track, how do you keep going on the track you're going? Because it suits your privilege and your prerogative. And so we get a theology of women that tells you how you're complementary to my work and my, and I'm sure there are men who think that's all ludicrous too, you know. It's helpful when they stand up and say that more than it is sometimes when we say it, because it looks like we're simply promoting ourselves. But not to say it is also not a good thing for us. It's also not a good thing for us. Thanks for helping me think about that again. I appreciate it.
Mike, you wanna?
Thank you. Reflecting on the life of Catherine, one of the things I most admire about her is her courage to speak truth to power. Wonderful example, and I guess the wondering goes on and say, how did she come to that? How did she have the confidence to do that, to know that she was right in confronting power? And was it due to that deep mystical death or contact with the divine that gave her that confidence? And then shifting to the present time, how does the ordinary person who might not experience that deep mystical, death that she encountered there, how does the ordinary person have that confidence that he or she is right and going ahead and then speaking that truth? How is that, what kind of assurance you have that's just not arrogance and ego on the part of the person, but it's really coming from the depths and really according to divine contact.
I think that's important. I mean, one of the points I tried to make for her is that she wasn't very eager to get going on this at some points. But there's this encouragement that I'm going to give this to you. There is this prayerful attentiveness on her part. And that's something that we can all practice, a real prayerful attentiveness. The other thing I think is we're fairly confident that what she did, she's canonized, she's a doctor of the church, we're fairly confident she's on the right side of history. Well, look what she tried to rescue us from. And we would be inattentive if we did not think the conditions for the possibility of something similar do exist right now. You know, we have people who are not, we do pray and believe, interested in power struggles. But we could say that it would be pretty easy, if Benedict XVI was someplace else, for a little cult to grow up around him, whether he wanted it or not. Even if he was forcibly furious about it, it wouldn't stop a little cult growing up around him, because maybe that's the way that I like things. Which is why I'm saying we need a little bit more caution. Someone, I don't remember who it was right now, said recently, maybe a good pope is bad for the church. And I see that in the sense of we abrogate our responsibility. He's gonna take everything and make it all right, and then when we don't like it, then we're really mad at him. So this is the other part about this three sort of the. It's not just three. It's not only the hierarchy. It's not only the sensus fidelium. It's not only the theologians. Maybe we should be thinking also about the power of the Holy Spirit here. Not only infusing all those, but acting as well to move all those. Because it's through the Spirit that Jesus, the advocate, the paraclete, I promise you, will come, and he's going to be with you always. So that's how the living Christ is with us, through the power of the Spirit. So I think that for her, I think it is, whether despite mystical death, there's a constant commitment to prayer and real listening, and I think that's our challenge too. reading the signs of the times has become a cliche almost, but it isn't, because the times keep changing. And the signs can be clear in one era and obscure in another. So there's a real effort that we have to develop the skills to interpret those signs. Things are the 14th century was very complex. And so is this. So is this. I think that's the other point is community for us. I mean, she did surround herself with a group of people and engaged with them. And I think this is where our own coming together, small groups, however you want to do this, not always agreeing with ourselves, you know, but finding a way to really challenge one another to what really is the issue, what really is the case, what really is the action. Not just sort of running off because it feels good. I mean, we can pat ourselves on the back, but because we're also doing the hard work. The hard work. The last thing to say about that is also that we really need to more deeply intellectually appropriate our tradition. I mean, the requirement of study isn't just for theologians. I mean, it's really for all of us, because all of us are called to do theology. So we've got to know what happened in the past in order to do what we need to do in the present.
We have time for one more question, and then maybe we'll take our conversation to the reception.
Thank you. My first question had been going to be, does anyone here have a Ricola? Because I thought you needed one.
Well, yeah, that would have been nice. Thank you. I appreciate your thoughtfulness. Most thoughtful.
But my real question that came up soon after that is, how do you believe that a pope can afford to be authentic?
Wow.
Very good. Yeah.
That's a great question. That's a great. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe it is, because I'll just go into my Godfather story. So I think that's precisely what's at stake every time. You know, I think because, I mean, apparently in a recent interview he said, I don't want to be a Superman. You know, I don't want to be a Superman. I think that's really a challenge. So I think he's found some little things for himself, I think. I'm just what I see. You know, I mean, at least, you know, I think he's living a different style of life, for one thing. And it seems to work for him, because each one of us has something that works for us, that keeps us a little more humble. And I think that probably does that for him. I don't know, you know. I don't know. But I think that's the exemplum we're looking for. But what we know about authenticity is that it winds up on the cross. That's what we do know about authenticity. We're certain of that. We're certain of that. That's a great question. I love it. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
That our patroness is smiling for the attentiveness that you've paid to her and to all of us here tonight. So I invite you, we'll continue on the third moment of our evening in the East Dining Room right next door. But before we go, I just want to take one moment to thank a few people. The group that helped put together our worship before, Amy Omi and Ann Hillman, and her choir. Her choir is now practicing for the baccalaureate mass, so they weren't able to stay with us, but just a word of gratitude for all that they did. And I wanted to also quickly introduce, we have two new faces in the Siena Center. Janet Tenza, you want to wave? Janet's our new events and communications coordinator and helped immensely get tonight together. And also Tammy Murdoch, our new student intern.